This game will never stop being relevant. 15 years on, and people are still discovering things within Shadow of the Colossus. The most insignificant details from this game have birthed the most wondrous discoveries, creating a perpetual Easter egg chase for the fans. One of the most famous mysteries is what the fans have affectionately referred to as the Stonehenge rock. There is no other rock cluster in the game that looks like this, but it seemingly has no function beyond its unique aesthetic. It's just weirdly there. Now, right off the bat, I know people are going to say that the mystery of the Stonehenge rock has already been solved. We already know its function. The rock was supposed to be used in a cut boss battle with a Colossus named Sirius. The stone-studded boar would run in between these rocks, get stuck, and then we would kill it. It might surprise you, however, that this is not the mystery I wish to discuss. I acknowledge the fact that we already know about this cut boss battle. Instead, I actually have some new knowledge regarding the Stonehenge rock which might surprise you. Knowledge that will continue our collective Easter egg hunt. I have been doing some research into religious history lately. Specifically, I have been reading the famous writings of Mircea Eliade, the famous Romanian historian. In his book titled A History of Religious Ideas, Volume 1, Eliade presents his investigations into the religions of the Neolithic Period, between 4000 and 3000 BCE. One of the most famous contributions to world religion that came out of this period were the megaliths, huge temples and passages made of unimaginably heavy stone. There are 3 megalith variations that Eliade makes note of in this book. One is the Cromlech. Crom means circle, and lech means space. Obviously, the most famous example of the Cromlech is Stonehenge in England, famous for its circular construction of stones. The second variation is known as a menhir, a large stone of considerable height. The most famous example of menhirs are probably the rows of menhirs at Carnac in Brittany, France. For the purposes of our discussion surrounding Shadow of the Colossus, the third variation of the megalith is what is most important here. This variation is known as the dolmen. The dolmen looks very much like the Stonehenge rock in Shadow of the Colossus. It features several supporting stones holding up 1 or 2 large stones. In case it wasn't obvious when I said the word dolmen, I'll state it outright. The word dolmen is etymologically very close to the name Dorman, which of course is the name of the primary antagonist in Shadow of the Colossus. The resemblance between the words dolmen and dorman become even more uncanny when you consider 2 factors. First of all, the word dolmen was originated by a French archaeologist named Théophile Corret de la Tour d'Auvergne in his book titled Origine Galloise. The original spelling of dolmen was D-O-L-M-I-N. replacing the E with an I. On top of this, consider the fact that Shadow of the Colossus was made by a Japanese game developer, and the Japanese don't have the letter L in their language. When the Japanese tried to pronounce the letter L by speaking an English word, they replaced it with the letter R. So if the Japanese tried to pronounce dolmen or the French dolmen, they would pronounce it like dorman. Granted, I know that the canonical explanation for Dorman's name is that it is a reference to the biblical king Nimrod, and Dorman is Nimrod spelled backwards. However, given the hidden sophistication of not only this game's lore, but the other games made by Team Ico, I cannot ignore the fact that there might be something else here. If the game makers knew about the connection between the dolmen and dorman, this elevates the sophistication of the game's hidden symbolism and mythology. The connections do not stop here, however. I would like to draw all of your attention to the possible function of the dolmen from the Neolithic period. As I said, nothing is definitive, but it is strongly suspected that dolmens, to quote Eliade, are burial places. The dolmens along the European Atlantic and as far as the Netherlands, from as far north as England all the way down to Spain and Italy, all point to a continent-wide cult of the dead. The dolmens often mark the sites of enormous necropolises. At Los Millar in Spain, for example, a necropolis of about 100 covered passages has been excavated. Most of the graves are under enormous mounds. Certain burials contain as many as 100 dead, representing several generations of the same people. Out of all of Europe, however, the most impressive expression of this ancient death cult was found in Malta. In the remarkable necropolis at Hal Salfiani, now called the Hypogeum and comprising several chambers cut into rock, the bones of some 7,000 persons have been exhumed. The Hypogeum, along with several other Neolithic megaliths through Italy, all feature dolmen. The relation of the dolmen to a cult of the dead is important to Shadow of the Colossus. As we know, the ancient religion practiced in the game's Forbidden Land centered heavily around death and resurrection. The basic narrative of the game deals with bringing a dead woman back to life, after all. There is more to the Forbidden Land's ancient death cult, but for the sake of time, I won't go into it here. If you want to learn more about the game's ancient religion, please refer to my videos titled Team Eco, Shared Universe Theory, and Shadow of the Colossus, Story Explanation and Analysis. Now, one thing that has puzzled many archaeologists and historians for centuries is how these megaliths, these dolmen, were constructed. All of these impressive stone structures were built before the invention of metal tools, or the wheel. As I researched what could have possibly built these temples, I came across a bit of folklore regarding the megaliths in a region of Malta called Gigantia. According to local legend, the ruins were remains of temples built by giants who once resided there. One such place with several ruins is the area known as Gigantia, or the Giant's Tower in English, in the heart of Gozo. I also came across folklore regarding dolmen located in Basque country, an area that straddles the border between France and Spain. The Basque also had myths about giants who built their large stone structures. I'll tell you about two of them. One giant was known as the Bassajon. Typically, the Bassajon are depicted as covered in hair, carrying a huge staff or club, are possessed of enormous strength, and are frequently credited with the construction of the megalithic funerary monuments that litter the Basque country and the Navarre. If you do a general Google search of what the Bassajon looks like, you will see why I am bringing him up. Clearly, the stature, the weapons, and the prevalence of hair mimic many of the colossi we see in the game. One final thing, there are other myths about giants which originate from the Basque region. There were giants known as Gentile. No, really, that's what they were called. Gentile are giants, and are said to represent the pagans who inhabited the land before Christianity. Gentile were enormous, strong, and hairy, and loved to throw rocks. Because of this, they were thought to have built the many megalithic stone circles and dolmens in the Basque region. In my research regarding Gentile, I noticed the reference to the throwing of giant stones across huge distances a lot. This might have something to do with the other huge stones we see littering the Forbidden Land, just sticking out of the ground, but who knows. To conclude, I want to point out something regarding the Gentile and their relation to the dolmen as burial markers. Quote, according to legend, the Gentile died out after a huge bright cloud appeared, heralding the birth of Jesus. The frightened Gentile did not want change and ran down the mountains and hid in a dolmen, never to return. So not only do the dolmen mark the burial spots of human ancestors, but also that of giants. I know it's a long shot, but I like to think that the Stonehenge rock in the game was left there as a tribute to the boss that nobody got to experience, as a marker of what was before the concept died. Oftentimes, lots of work goes into games that never sees the light of day because it doesn't fit the overall experience. And so, the data, the models, are left in the code for people to discover. But that is just my personal interpretation. It's probably wrong. What isn't my interpretation, however, is the association that dolmen have with death cults and giants. When you throw in the etymological closeness that the word dolmen has with the name Dorman, you are left with parallels that can't easily be ignored. Maybe there's nothing there, but maybe there is. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a fat like. Just hit it, don't even think about it. Believe me, it helps me out a lot. Also, if you want to learn about some more recent revelations regarding Shadow of the Colossus or Team Ico's other game, The Last Guardian, click on either of the two videos you see on screen now. When I say recent, by the way, I mean in the last year. These are things that you most likely don't know about and will likely find fascinating. Until my next video, just remember, as always, stay yellow.